Hey everyone, welcome back to Grace Note Forge. Today I wanted to share one of the fastest and easiest ways I've seen recently to work with text in Blender, especially when it comes to jewelry design. So Blender has always been kind of tricky when it comes to modeling with text, but this workflow is going to be really simplified and I think it'll really help a lot of you. So in order to get this working, you do need to install a few add-ons ahead of time. So the main ones that I'm going to be using are JewelCraft, BoolTools, and the one that's going to be doing most of the heavy lifting, QRemeshify. So I'll leave links in the description to where you can find those, but once you get them installed, you should be good to go. And thankfully they're all free to use. So to get started, I'm just here in the default page, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit A to select everything and X to delete it. So working with a nice clean slate, I'm just going to bring up those add-ons, and over here in JewelCraft, I'm just going to set the units. And all that really did was change my units from meters to millimeters, and also changed my grid size to kind of suit that too. I'm not going to be talking too much about JewelCraft, but for now all I'm going to do is go over here to curve and just select our size curve. So I'm going to go for size 6 in US measurements and just hit OK. And you can see that brought in a nice curved circle for us. So next, I'm just going to hit Shift A and bring in some text. So down here, just going to select that, and you can see it's way smaller than what we need. So I'm going to scale that up with S and just make that a bit bigger. And then holding Alt and just dragging, I'm going to get to top view mode and just hit Tab to get into edit mode. So from here, I'm just going to change the text to something more interesting to work with our design. And that should work fine. Then I'm going to go over here to our text menu. Just by hitting this little A, and I want to go over to our fonts, and I'm going to change our font. So selecting this little file, it's going to bring up all of our fonts that are kind of pre-installed with Blender. I believe you can add to this list too, so if you find any fonts online that you might want to work with better, you can go ahead and add those. So when looking for a font, especially for this design, because this is going to be bent across the head of the ring, it's really important to keep in mind how that's actually going to be cast. So you really don't want it to have anything that's too thin and separated. That's really not going to work for our design. Something that might cast a little bit better are letters that are connected in between the individual letters and probably a little bit thicker. So I'm just going to find something that will work a little bit better. You can see ones like this are, connected, but they're pretty thin, so that probably wouldn't work. So I think I'm going to go with this one down here, which is the Script MT Bold. That seems like it should work pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and select that and then open the font. And you can see it changed our text. So I'm going to go back into object mode by hitting Tab. And I think I'm just going to scale this up a little bit more. And I just want to center it really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and set the origin to the center of the mass. Then I can right click again and just snap that to the cursor. Now that's nice and center. I just want to bring that up maybe a little bit more, so I'm going to hit G and then Y. And then probably scale it up just a little bit more. And that's looking pretty good. Now, one of the reasons that text has always been kind of tricky to work with in Blender is particularly the geometry you're kind of left with. So right now this is all still editable font, and I want to change this over to a mesh. So I'm just going to right click and convert this to mesh. And now if I go into tab, we can see our geometry that we're working with, which is pretty ugly and messed up. If I were to wrap this around the curve right now, it would give me a whole lot of artifacts and really not look good. So we're going to fix that in a minute with the QRemeshify, but for now, I'm just going to give this some thickness by selecting everything with A and then hitting E to extrude that. And for now, I think I'm going to raise this just 1.5 millimeters. Should be fine. And then I can hit tab, going back into object mode. So really quick, just to show those artifacts, what we're gonna end up doing is using a curve modifier over here in our deform. And if we select that curve, you can see it bends it around, but really introduces a lot of these little artifacts that are not nice to work with. So that's why before we do that, we're going to use the QRemeshify. So this is where a lot of the magic is going to happen, and for this, I'm really not going to change anything on here. You're free to kind of play with it as you like to see what it does, but I'm just going to leave it as is, and with the text selected, I'm just going to hit remesh. And that'll take a quick second, but once it's done, it doesn't really look like anything happened just yet. But if I go into wireframe mode, you can see it remeshed the text and made some really nice geometry that kind of fits the contours of the text. So this should be able to be bent around our curve really nicely now. So now I can just use that modifier again. So I'm going to go to our modifiers, into deform, and hit curve. Then I can select that size again. And you can see now we don't have any of those artifacts. It's nice and clean. So one other thing that I would want to do, just to make this a little bit smoother, is add a subdivision modifier. So over in generate, do a subdivision surface modifier and probably bump that up a little bit. So the next thing I'd want to do is make a band for this. So I'm just going to select our size curve and hit Shift D to make a duplicate. I can right click to keep that in the same space, and just going to change the name to band. Now with the band selected, I can go over to our curve tab here, and I'm going to go down to geometry and scroll down to bevel and just bump up the depth. And I'm going to double check the size a little bit later, but for now I'm just going to give it some thickness. And I also like to right click and change this to shade flat. Right now it's set to smooth, so that'll give us a little bit better representation of what the geometry looks like. So I don't really want it to be perfectly round, so I'm going to turn up the extrude as well. And it'll give us a little bit more of like a pill-shaped profile. And I'm just going to change some of these settings to kind of get it in place. And see what looks good. So I want the inside diameter to line up with our size, because currently this is going to be too small. So back over in band, I'm just going to turn up the offset and set that right underneath or in line with the bottom of our text. And that's looking pretty good. I think next I would just want to probably just scale up this text a little bit more. I want it to where the band is kind of fully in contact with both letters on either side. So I'm just going to hit S and scale this up. And then probably move this up as well. So hit G and then Y. And that should be good. Now I can just go through and use the measure tool to kind of see what thicknesses I'm at. I want to make sure I'm not too thin in any areas to make it too difficult for casting, but 1.3 is just a little bit too thin. I kind of want to shoot for something maybe a little bit thicker. So I'm going to try to do something that's probably closer to 1.5. So selecting the band again, I'm going to turn up the depth. And also change the offset. So that's pretty good. And for our width here, I think we're pretty good. Around 3 should work just fine. So now that I'm happy with this, I'm just going to convert the band curve to mesh. I'm going to right click and convert to mesh. And now I can work on actually cutting this out. I could leave the design as is, but what I'm aiming to do is just have the font connecting between both sides. So to do that, what I'd want to do is select our text. And because we have a few modifiers added on, we're going to have to apply those. But first, I'm just going to actually duplicate it, hitting Shift D and then right clicking. And just to keep everything clean, I'm going to hit or change this to text cut and hide our original text. So as you can guess, we're going to use this as the Boolean cutting tool on the band. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and apply the modifiers on the cut text. And now I can go ahead and select that cut text and then shift select the band. And then holding Control Shift and then minus on the numpad. That's just going to go ahead and apply the Boolean to cut that out. This feature is from the BoolTools add-on. If you didn't install that, you can go ahead and add a Boolean modifier to do that. But you can see it left all these little cutout pieces that we kind of want to get rid of. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and go into edit mode. I'm going to select everything with A. Then I'm going to right click and go down to separate by loose parts. And once I did that, if we go back into object mode, you can see every one of these is its own little object now. So I can just shift select each one of these. And then hit X and just delete them. Now we just have the cutout of our band. So I'm going to unhide our original text. And you can see that looks pretty good. So the last thing that I would do is add a subdivision modifier onto the band just to smooth that out. And double check these creases to make sure there's no gaps or anything too funky happening. But that seems to be pretty good and should work just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And then I can select our text, and since we like how that's looking, I'm going to apply these modifiers as well. Then I can join them together by just selecting the text, shift selecting the band, and hitting Control J. And this should work great for 3D printing. The only other thing that I would want to do before exporting this is just to make sure our resolution is a little bit more friendly for the slicing software. So over here in this drop down, I'm going to hit the stats, and you can see we're sitting at just a little under 1,000,000 vertices. So I want to make that a little bit more user friendly. So over here in modifiers, I'm just going to do a decimate, and there's quite a few flat areas, so I think we can get away with taking it down by honestly about 90%. So I'm just going to do 0.1 in the ratio and hit enter. And you can see back over in our stats now, that changed it from 900,000 to 91,000, which is a lot more manageable and should work great for 3D printing. So now I can just go ahead and apply this, and this should be good to go. So I'll probably end up doing more videos showcasing how to use the QRemeshify add-on. It's seriously a lifesaver in a lot of different ways, but especially with text here, it's just a huge time saver. So let me know in the comments if you want to see anything else being done with these add-ons. I'm always experimenting and trying out different designs, so I'd be happy to play around with this a little bit more. But that's it for today, so as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.